الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So tonight we'll be continuing our discussion of the section which we've entitled Personal Manners from the book Muslim Morals and Manners. And previously we talked about in some detail about the etiquettes of eating and the etiquettes of drinking. And tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we will introduce the topic of clothing and dress. And first of all, what I want to mention is that the etiquettes, the legality, the permissibility of clothing, the original rule when it comes to clothing, all clothing, is that it's permissible. Because it falls into the general rule mentioned by the scholars in which they said, al-aslu fil ibadat, al-hurmatu wal-hadar, wal-aslu fil mu'amalat, al-hillu wal-ibaha. So the scholars, they said, studying the evidence from the Quran and Sunnah, they were able to extract a principle. And the principle basically says that the original rule when it comes to acts of worship is that they're all impermissible. They're all haram. Unless we have evidence to the contrary. So anytime you want to do an act of worship, before you can do it, you have to know that there's evidence to support the act of worship that you want to do. But on the other side of the coin, if the action has nothing to do with ibadah, then the original rule for that is it's permissible, unless someone can provide proof to the contrary. And clothing falls into that second category, the category of mu'amalat, things that are not directly related to al-ibadah. So the original rule when it comes to clothing is what? Permissible. A Muslim can wear anything. That's the original rule, unless there's proof to the contrary. And clothing, another point that we want to mention is that clothing is a bounty from the bounties of Allah, which He has given to us and has a lot of benefit for us. So it's one of the bounties and favors of Allah upon mankind that He gave us clothing. As Allah says in the Quran, Ya bani Adam, قد أنزلنا عليكم لباسا يواري سوآتكم وريشا ولباس التقوى ذلك خير ذلك من آيات الله لعلهم يذكرون. He says, O children of Adam, indeed we have granted you clothing to cover your private parts, and as an adornment and a means of beautification. And the adornment of piety is the best adornment. That is from the signs of Allah, that they may remember and reflect. So, clothing, the fact that Allah has clothed us and provided us with clothing, is a bounty and a virtue from Him. That's the second point. The third point that I want to mention, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. The third point I want to mention is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us clothing to achieve certain objectives. And when we choose our clothing, we have to choose our clothing with these objectives in mind. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He prioritized these objectives as well. So basically He taught us that this objective is the most important objective and the first and primary consideration that you should have in your mind when you choose a garment. And then this objective, and then this objective. So these objectives are not created equal. They're basically three fundamental objectives, but they are prioritized by Allah. So the first priority when it comes to clothing, the first priority is satrul awra. The number one objective for which Allah gave us clothing is to cover our private parts. As Allah says, libasan yuwari sawatikum warisha. Clothing to cover your private parts and as an adornment and a means of beautification. So notice, lahidu, He mentioned covering the private parts what? First and then adornment, which means the number one concern should be covering and concealing the private parts. طيب, for a man, what are his private parts? Al-Jamhur, the majority of the scholars say that a man cannot reveal to someone who he shouldn't be revealing himself to, someone he has to cover his awrah to. He cannot reveal that which is between as-surra or rukbah, between the navel and the knees. The majority of the scholars say this is a man's awrah. So whatever clothing he picks should do what? Should cover between as-surra what? Ar-rukbah. That's the first concern he should have, is that I have to pick clothing which will cover me between my navel and my knees. Okay? He shouldn't pick a garment which covers him everywhere else, but between the navel and knees, he's what? He's exposed. طيب. For a woman, al-Jamhur, the majority of the scholars say that all of the woman is awrah, with the exception of her face. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. All of a woman is awrah with the exception of her face and her hands. I'll say that again. According to al-Jamhur, the majority of the scholars, all of a woman is awrah with the exception of her face and hands. So that means that her forearm is what? Awrah. It means that her feet are what? Awrah. Her feet are awrah. Her what? Her ears are what? Her neck is what? Her shin is what? Awrah. She has to cover all of that, with the exception of her face and what? And her hands. It also means that her what? Her hair is awrah. So she puts on a scarf and she has what? Her forelock is sticking out. She hasn't covered what? She hasn't covered her awrah. So a woman has to pick clothing, garments, with this in mind. That I have to cover what? I have to cover these parts. My entire body except what? My face and hands. طيب. ثم بعد ذلك, the second priority, the second thing that the believer should bear in mind is clothing which will protect them from the elements. So the second objective for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored us with the bounty of al-libas, clothing, wa alaikum assalam, is to protect ourselves from the elements. As he says in the Quran, وَجَعَلَ لَكُمْ سَرَابِيلَ تَقِيكُمْ وَجَعَلَ لَكُمْ سَرَابِيلَ تَقِيكُمْ الْحَرِّ. And he has created garments for you to protect you from the scorching heat. And he also says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَالْأَنْعَامَ خَلَقَهَا خَلَقَهَا لَكُمْ فِيهَا دِفْءٌ وَمَنَافِعٌ. He says, and cattle, he has created them for you. In them there is warmth, warm clothing. From them you make warm clothing and protection from the bitter cold and numerous benefits. Ibn Abbas, Mujahid and Qatada, when they made tafsir of this ayah, they said, لَكُمْ فِيهَا ثِيَابٌ وَلِبَاسٌ يُنْسَجٌ. He says, for you in them are clothes and woven garments. So basically, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about, or he mentions these two ayat, he's talking about clothing that we make which will do what? Which will protect us from the elements. So the first concern, you're going to go to your closet, you're going to go to the store to purchase some clothing. You're going to go to the closet and pick out an outfit. The first thing you have in mind is what? Covering your awrah. I have to pick something which is going to cover my awrah. Second concern, something's going to protect me from what? From the elements. Okay? Shouldn't be like those people who... We'll come to that, inshallah. We'll come to that. طيب. Number 3, the third objective behind clothing is beautification and adornment. Beautification and adornment. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَ لِعِبَادِهِ وَالطَّيِّبَاتِ مِنَ الرِّزْقِ. He says, say, who has forbidden the beautiful clothing and adornment which Allah has granted for His slaves, and the good and lawful provisions. So, and in the hadith collected by Muslim, on the authority of Abd'Llah ibn Mas'ud, a man came to the Prophet and he said, إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ يُحِبُّ أَن يَكُونَ ثَوْبُهُ حَسَنًا وَنَعْلُهُ hasana. He says, O Messenger of Allah, a man loves to wear nice clothing, attractive clothing, and nice shoes. Whereupon the Prophet said, whereupon the Prophet replied, approving of this, Inna Allaha jamilun yuhibbul jamal. He said, indeed, Allah is beautiful and He loves that you what? That you beautify yourselves. He loves beautification. So the third purpose for which we adorn ourselves, or for which clothing has been given to us by Allah as a favor from Him, is a source of beautification and adornment, which means that there's no harm if a Muslim what? Tries to use his clothing as a means to what? To make himself or herself look what? Attractive. But that shouldn't be our number one what? Priority. And this is the way it is with the kuffar. The kuffar, the first thing that they think about, they actually do what? They turn the objectives upside down. So they start first and foremost with what? What's going to make me look good, right? That's the first thing on their mind. Even if it exposes their bodies to the elements. So it'll be bitter cold. You'll be like, for example, in Chicago, the windy city. In the wintertime, they'll get gusts of wind that might take the temperature 10 degrees, 15 degrees below zero. And you'll have a woman outside in a miniskirt. And this is, I'm not exaggerating, this is reality. Because their number one concern is what? What makes me look good. And they're not even concerned about whether or not it will protect them from the elements or not. Let alone if it will cover what? Cover the odor. That's the last thing that they're thinking about. And what we have to avoid as Muslims is we have to avoid imitating them and allowing our mentality to mimic their mentality. And unfortunately, that happens with a lot of Muslims. So you'll see the Muslim who he's wearing something, you can tell he didn't take the elements in consideration, didn't take his aura into consideration, but he only took what? Oh, this makes me look good. So you'll see a man who's, for example, overweight, and he'll wear some very tight what? Pants. And he'll wear a very tight shirt that's probably a couple sizes too small. And he'll come to the mosque because I'm a pious and committed Muslim and I love to pray with the Muslims. He'll come to the mosque and then he'll what? He'll make ruku' and reveal what? Reveal his aura. He'll reveal his aura. And to him, he looks good. And maybe he does look good, but he made the least important thing the most what? Important thing. And now his salat is in jeopardy of not even being accepted. Why? Because his aura is exposed while he's praying to his Lord. And this is also true for women. It happens also for what? For women. So we have women who wear hijab in a way which is stylish. Their number one concern is what? How good they look. But the stylish hijab that they wear doesn't meet what? The requirements of covering the aura. So they're wearing a khimar which is very stylish, has color, maybe has glitter, but it's a short khimar. So when they wrap it, and they wrap it in a way which is what also attractive, because they have all these what? Yatafannanun. They have these different methods and ways of wrapping. And so when they finish wrapping, at the end of the day, the khimar starts what? Stops what? Stops right here. And they have an abaya that's cut in a V. So what does that mean? That means that what? This area of the woman is what? Exposed. And we said all of the woman is what? Aura. Except the face and what? Hands. So definitely, she's what? She's exposed. Or she may be the same thing. She's wrapping and doing everything, and so it doesn't cover the back of the neck. Okay? And they have these abayat, which are cut in a way which what? Which are very, I guess, shapely, and they kind of, they're form-fitting. They're fitted, if you will. And so when she wears the abaya, it, instead of concealing the adornment, it does what? It accentuates. And it may even make her more attractive than if what? Because sometimes when something is covered but it's shaped, it makes it more attractive than it really what? Than it really is. So from this, we see the reality or the coming or the truth in what the Prophet ﷺ said when he said, لَتَتَّبِعَنَّ سَنَنَ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ شِبْرًا بِشِبْرٍ وَذِرَاعًا بِذِرَاعٍ حَتَّى لَوْ سَلَكُوا جُحْرَ ضَبٍّ لَسَلَكْتُمُوهُ قُلْنَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ الْيَهُودَ وَالنَّصَارَى قَالَ فَمَنْ. In this hadith, the Prophet, he said, you will follow, you Muslims, will follow in the footsteps of those who came before you inch by inch, foot by foot, to the extent that even if they entered the hole of a lizard, you would follow them inside. Which means, even if they did something which was harmful to them and you saw it harming them, you saw it, you're watching it and you see for yourself that they did this and the consequence and result was something harmful to them, you would what? You would still do it. You would do the same thing. And this is a perfect example, where we're talking about dress is a perfect example, because we see how in this society, for example, take America for example, as they became less and less conservative in their dress, certain crimes became more and more prevalent. Crimes like what? Rape. The more they became liberal when it came to dress, the more rape began to climb, to the point that in this country, I want to say every 6 seconds or every 9 seconds, a woman is raped. Is there no correlation between the lewdness of women and what? And these crimes against women, these assaults against women. So we see this playing out, but we do what? We follow them. And now, unfortunately, in Muslim countries, you see that what? Rape starts to do what? Starts to climb. So we see how their behavior had this negative result. We saw it play out. We know the correlation. But in spite of that, we behave the same way and get the same results. Just like the Prophet said in the hadith, if they fell into the hole of a lizard and got stuck therein, you would follow them inside. طيب. And I don't want this to seem like it's all about women, because we will discuss men as well. But I do want to quote or make a quote or mention a quote from a Sheikh, al-Imam Muhammad al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, in a book that he wrote, which I advise my sisters to read it, even men, because you have wives, you have daughters, and they need to know how to wear hijab. But the book is Hijab al-Mar al-Muslima wa Jilbabuha, the covering of the Muslim woman and her garments, the garment she's supposed to wear. So he, in his introduction to the book, he talks about, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair. So in the beginning of the book, the introduction, he talks about the phenomenon, the reality, the trends that caused him to write the book in the first place. Why did he write the book? So he says, indeed, my heart is on the verge of being split asunder by grief and sorrow because of what I witness of this contemptible nudity and this disgraceful open display of feminine beauty and charms, which the women of this age have gathered upon, much the way moths gather around a blazing fire. Now I want you to think about this. A Sheikh al-Albani is not from America. He didn't live in America. He lived primarily in Jordan and Syria. Okay? So he's talking about nudity in Muslim lands. Okay? He's talking about nudity in Muslim lands. So he's talking about nudity amongst Muslims. Not talking about nudity amongst non-Muslims. Talking about women who didn't what? Wear hijab properly, or they didn't wear hijab at all. He goes on to say, and these women have most certainly been beguiled and bamboozled and tricked by the fallacious European society, and have run behind it and chased its pomp, glitter, and temptations, and as a result have openly displayed their beauty in the manner commonly practiced in the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, revealing in front of strangers what one of them used to be ashamed to reveal and considered unacceptable that it be seen by her own father or her other male relatives. Now, notice he mentioned something specific, or he mentioned something important. He said that they have been tricked by the fallacious European society and they've run what? Behind it. So that means, that goes to show, like what we said earlier, that they got their priorities mixed up. And they were more concerned about what's trending, what's fashionable, what's beautiful in the eyes of what? Of a certain group of people. And that became their number one priority, as opposed to what? As opposed to the other priorities which are more important, which are covering the aura and protecting themselves from the elements. So this is important for our ladies, because you have to ask yourself, what is the source? What is my primary concern when I get dressed? Who do I look at to say what is what? Beautiful. And if we're looking at the West and our primary concern is what looks good to the West, that's a problem. And it leads to what? This trend. So now let me ask you this question. Since the Sheikh is talking about what's happening amongst Muslim women, what are the two main causes of this problem? Muslim women who wear hijab incorrectly, or they don't wear hijab at all. Both of them, which are unfortunately really common in the Muslim community. I would say that the reasons are two. One is that some Muslims, they actually question the legitimacy of hijab. They actually question, or they actually disbelieve, that there's something in Islam called hijab. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I've met Muslim women who will actually say there's nothing in the Quran, there's nothing in the deen that says a woman has to cover. They'll actually say that there's nothing in the deen. So that's one thing. One reason why this happens is that many Muslims are under the impression that there's no such thing as hijab. Hijab, they say, is Arab culture. Hijab is Arab culture, and Islam has nothing to do with what? Culture. That's what they'll say. They think that hijab has nothing to do with deen. It's all what? It's something which was passed down through generations via culture and tradition, customs. This is what some people practice, but it has nothing to do with the deen. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you have another group that say, no, we believe in hijab. We believe in hijab. But they don't know what constitutes hijab. They don't know what constitutes hijab. Or they have an incorrect concept of what constitutes hijab. So they'll think, for example, hijab, and we'll talk about this hopefully in some detail, they'll say hijab is just what? Modesty. Okay? Hijab means modesty, so you dress modestly. And then that becomes what? Relative. So it goes back to what I think or what I feel or my perspective of what modesty is, and there's no what specific what parameters or framework or guidelines that your dress has to fall into. Other people say, you know what hijab is? Hijab is covering the head. That's what they say. Hijab is covering the head. And that's how you get, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but you have female basketball players who are hijabis, right? And they'll have a big article about her in some Muslim magazine or some Muslim newspaper, and they'll have this girl who plays for a high school basketball team, but she sticks to and she's committed to wearing her hijab. And then they'll show a picture of her and she'll have like a bandana on or something like that, right? And she'll have a basketball uniform on. You guys know what a basketball uniform is, right? Tank top and shorts. And then she'll have what? That bandana. And they're praising her and applauding her for what? For sticking to her hijab, sticking to her Muslim traditions, and wearing her hijab, because they think that hijab is just what? Covering? The head. You have a Muslim woman who's on a swim team. Muslim woman on a swim team. And again, they're applauding her for what? Sticking to her hijab. And what does sticking to her hijab mean? She has a head covering. You know how they put that swim cap on? I mean, she looks like all these women wear hijab then, right? Like, all right. And some people think that hijab is just the scarf. It's a scarf that covers the hair, the neck, and the ears. And that's hijab, which means you can wear a tight shirt, you can wear tight jeans, you can wear high-heeled shoes, you can do all that, because what is hijab? It's just what? A covering for the hair, the ears, and the neck. So these are different misconceptions that you find about hijab that lead what? To what we're seeing. So what I want to talk about tonight, and then we'll continue next week, I just want to talk about the legitimacy of hijab. I want to talk about those ayat, those hadith that indicate that there is something in our deen called hijab. Hijab is not culture. Hijab is not a tradition which was just passed down from some people, but hijab is something actually that Allah and His Messenger have ordered the Muslim women to what? To observe. So the first proof is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in which He said, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنَّ وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ. Allah, He says, and tell the believing women to lower their gaze and guard their chastity, and not to display any of their beauty except that which must ordinarily appear thereof. And let them drape their scarves over their heads and upon their bosoms, and let them not display their charms and adornment. So if you look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the scarf that the Muslim woman is supposed to wear, He specifies that that scarf should do what? It should be what? Draped. And it should be brought around and made to cover what? The bosoms. Now what is it going to cover if it hangs over the head and it's brought around to drape over the bosoms? What is it going to cover in the process? It's going to cover the neck. It's also going to cover what? Shoulders. This is important because the women of the past, they did cover their hair. This was something that was a part of their culture. They didn't walk around with their head uncovered. But what they did was they would have a scarf and they would do what? They would tie it from behind themselves. And it would drape behind themselves. And then their garments would have a shaq, or what they call a jayb. It's like basically what? An opening. So you can put your head into it, right? So it would expose the bosoms area, right? So Allah ordered Muslim women to be different from these women who were covering, but to cover in a way which was more moral, more chaste, more modest. So He told them, take that same khimar, so the khimar was something known to them, وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ, and let them take those khimars that they already wear, it's part of their tradition, custom, take it and do what? And drape it down over what? Over their bosoms. If it's hanging down and being brought around like this, it's going to cover the neck, the bosoms, and the shoulders in the process. So think about that when you wear a hijab. And if you wear a hijab and you tie it like this, and then the shoulders are exposed, and the scarf stops short of the bosom line, it's not in compliance with what? With what Allah said. That this khimar should do what? Should come down, cover the shoulders, and cover what? The bosom area. وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ. طيب. The next ayah is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in which He said, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّبِيُّ قُلْ لِأَزْوَاجِكَ وَبَنَاتِكَ وَنِسَاءِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ يُدْنِينَ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ جَلَابِيبِهِنَّ ذَلِكَ أَدْنَى أَنْ يُعْرَفْنَ فَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ. O Prophet, tell your wives and your daughters and the women of the believers to draw their cloaks over their entire bodies. That is better, that they be known as respectable and decent women. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the garment that women should wear if they are believers, that will distinguish them from women who are slaves, they are owned, they're not free women, or women who are harlots, who are indecent. And He says that they should wear this jilbab. What is a jilbab? A jilbab is a cloak that women used to wear that would do what? They would take this cloak, this large cloak, which would be open in the front, and they would put it on top of their what? Their head. And then they would take it and bring it around like this and close it. And it would cover what? It would cover the garments that they normally would wear in their home. So there are a few things here. One is that the garment that you normally wear in the house to look good for your husband, for example, is not acceptable for what? For outside. Okay? Because He's telling them to do what? to take this and do what? And drape it over themselves. Okay? And not to wear what they wear in their homes outside. The next thing is, again, they would take this cloak, as I said, put it on their head and then bring it around. So what does that do? It creates almost this like what? This like cone shape. Again, doing what? Avoiding what? Tashkhis al-badan. It avoids what? Silhouetting the what? The body and showing the shape of the body. It's important for the hijab not to do what? Not to show the shape. If she puts it on her head and does like this and it comes out like that, it avoids what? A tashkhis. It avoids what? Silhouetting the body. So that's another thing a woman has to be mindful of when she wears hijab. She doesn't want to wear a garment that does what? That shows what type of shoulders she has, how wide her shoulders are, how wide her figure is. But she wants a garment that kind of does what? That doesn't reveal that, or conceals that to the best of her ability. So these are some of the points about the jilbab. We'll talk about that more in the next segment, not tonight. طيب ثم بعد ذلك al-Albani, he comments on the two verses and he says, the first verse speaks unequivocally of the obligation to cover each and every adornment and all that is beautiful and attractive. All that is beautiful and attractive. So that's the garment she wears in the home should be covered. And also for a woman, her adornment is everything except what? The face and hands. Her adornment is everything except the face and the hands. So she shouldn't think, oh, my feet, I have ugly feet. No, her feet are what? An adornment. They have to be what? Covered. And he says, and that none of that should be displayed in front of strangers except that which appears unintentionally. So the only thing that should be shown is something that happens or gets shown or gets revealed inadvertently. For example, she's all covered up and the wind blows. And then what? Part of her shin gets revealed. And she does what? She covers it immediately. So the only thing that should be revealed is something that gets revealed unintentionally. She shouldn't come out in a way where she's revealing something which she knows should be covered. Then he says, and women are not held accountable in such cases, provided that they hasten to cover their beauty the moment it becomes uncovered. We also have the hadith collected by Abu Dawood on the authority of Aisha radiallahu anha, in which she said that Asma bint Abi Bakr entered the home of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam wearing thin, revealing garments. The Messenger of Allah turned away from her and said, O Asma, certainly it is not proper that anything be seen of a woman once she reaches the age of puberty, except this and this. And he pointed to his face and his hands. Now this hadith is the subject of some contention amongst the scholars of hadith. Some of them authenticate it, some of them say it's not authentic. But the one thing which is certainly true is that all of the scholars, in spite of their arguing about the authenticity of the hadith, they agree about its meaning, the authenticity of its meaning. They said the meaning is correct even though the hadith may not be authentic. And from among the scholars who authenticates this is Sheikh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, the great muhaddith of this time. He authenticates the hadith. But the scholars, as I said, they agreed upon what? Its meaning. They have ijma', they have consensus, unanimous agreement that this hadith is what? Is correct in terms of what? Its meaning. That a woman should not come out of her home revealing what? Revealing anything other than her face and her hands. So for example, Ibn Hazm in his book Maratib al-Ijma', he says, وَاتَّفَقُوا عَلَى أَنَّ شَعْرَ الْحُرَّةِ وَجِسْمِهَا حَاشَ وَجْهَهَا وَيَدَهَا عَوْرَةً. He says, and the scholars are agreed that the hair and body of a free woman, with the exception of her face and hands, must be covered. And Ibn al-Qattan, he has a book called Ahkam al-Nadhr, the rulings of what can be looked at. He says, فَلَا يَخْفَى تَحْرِيمُ النَّظَرِ مِنْ الْأَجْنَبِي إِلَى مَا عَدَى وَجْهِهَا وَكَفَّيْهَا وَهَذَا مَا لَا خِلَافَ فِيهِ. He says, so it is clear that a stranger seeing anything besides a woman's face and hands is haram, absolutely prohibited. And there's no difference of opinion amongst the scholars about that. So this is the first part I wanted to mention and talk about and discuss. And we'll get into some of the more, the second part of the discussion in our next segment, when we talk about what constitutes hijab. But for the time being, here you have the Quran, the Sunnah, and the agreement of the scholars that what? There's a such thing in Islam called what? Hijab. Called hijab. And you also have indications, and we're going to talk about this more further later, you also have indications that hijab has what? Has guidelines and parameters. And it's not left to what? It's not left to our personal perspectives, and not left to our cultures, not left to our reason or logic, not even left to what, I guess you could say, considerations of time and space. But basically, Allah and His Messenger basically said that, look, there's parameters, there's guidelines for what is hijab and what's not hijab, what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. So we'll stop there. Any questions, comments, or complaints about what we talked about tonight? Adly.
Where do you get your statistics as far as the women, the increase in rape is directly correlated to the way that they dress? Where do those statistics that you get come from?
Well, I mean, I think if you just, if you do any study, any cursory study, and you look at, for example, let's say the early 1900s, late 1800s, when women dressed what? Very modestly in this country. A woman would not go out with her hair uncovered. Women wore flowing dresses, and women didn't typically what? Go out alone. And if you study, for example, study of rapes, recorded rapes in that, for example, that time, you'll find that they were what? They were few in number, relatively speaking, huh?
I feel that probably the fewer in number is more directly related to women feeling comfortable reporting the rape, as opposed to that they were less than. And actually, studies, including one that was done by the Federal Commission on Crime, showed that 4.4% of rapes were related to the way that the woman was actually dressed. And then most rapists actually say that it's not a factor at all. Not to say that there's not importance in hijab, but I feel statements like that detract away from the responsibility of the predator and crime.
No, that wasn't my intention at all. And I do understand what you're saying, that a lot of times what happens is that when a woman does get assaulted, then what happens is they blame the victim. It wasn't my intention at all to blame the victim. But what I'm saying is that a lot of these violent crimes against women, assaults, whether they be rapes or other crimes, there is a correlation between what? Between the lewdness of society and the increase of these types of crimes. And the lewdness might not just be the dress of the woman, but it could also be, for example, the acceptability of immorality in terms of the media. So, for example, if you go back to, I guess it would have been in the 50s, I don't know how many of you remember a show called I Love Lucy. And that show was on TV. This Lucy and Desi Arnaz, they were actually married in real life. But when they would go retire to the bedroom, they were married on the show and married in real life. They would have separate what? Beds. It just wasn't acceptable in society to see a man and a woman in the same bed and put that on television, even though they were married in real life. And then you gradually see what? You gradually see that change to the point now where you could be watching a regular television program with your children, and there might be what? A scene with a lot of what? A lot of revealing of body parts and so on and so forth. And this is what? Put right there, front and center for everyone. So it's not just necessarily what women are wearing, but it's different things in society which kind of promote and open that door. And that does have a causal effect for what we're seeing in terms of what? These violent crimes against women, these assaults against women. Just like if you look at violence in general, the games that we see played, basically these games that come out now, most of them are games which promote violence. And is there no correlation between that and the uptick in violence, the uptick in these shootings at colleges and public places and malls and things like that? So I do want you to understand, dear sister, that it wasn't my intention to blame the victim. Because whether the woman is she's running stark naked, she's wearing revealing clothing, or she's covered from head to toe, she shouldn't be assaulted. And men do have a responsibility to what? To tafadali, huh?
Right, and I guess my point was is that a lot of times now, it's not that they didn't exist so much in previous generations, it's just that there's more wealth of information available to everybody. And so even when you think of children's rights or anything, abuse was even more so prevalent in previous generations than maybe this generation, but that I don't see that immorality and I understand what your point is.
Eh.
You may have more immoral actions coming about because of the prevalence of it on TV and stuff like that.
Eh.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that consensual immorality is directly related to predatory behaviors of rape and violence and stuff like that. I don't see where they're directly related like that, especially when you research studies, which I have, that show that rape is very rarely linked to the behavior of the woman or in the sense of her promiscuity. There's actually more incidents of rapes happening because women are shy and modest and covered. So I just don't agree with that.
Okay, so
that's why I was asking where you were getting your information from, because other studies have actually showed that predators would be more likely to attack a woman who is timid and modest than he will a woman who might appear to be promiscuous by society standards.
okay, so
And so that's based on a study that was done by the
okay, well, let me answer this question. Do you have a study that shows that Muslim women get raped more than non-Muslim women?
I don't, but that's why I was asking you. Like it didn't break it down by religion. It just broke it down.
The reason why I'm saying is because when you start to say that the woman was shy and timid, that has nothing to do with her dress, though.
Well, it was saying that she was also dressed in more modest clothing.
Eh.
It was saying that she
Modest
was
according to who? Modest according to who? That's one thing. The second thing is, no, I lost my point, lost my train of thought. Go ahead, Adly. It'll come back to me. Huh?
No, but I mean, I understand. I mean, alhamdulillah, the importance of women covering. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying that I think it's a dangerous thing to correlate how a woman dresses with haram. I mean, an abusive behavior or predatory behavior by a man, and that's what I guess my point is with that.
And I don't.
And I know I don't think it was your intention. But I wanted to make sure to make clear that, and when you said the studies, I was interested in the studies that you had actually read that suggested that there was a higher correlation based on these incidents, because what I've read and what I've researched is the contrary.
Okay, I mean, we can open that door, I guess, because we can open that door. We can have that discussion, and maybe we can bring some of those studies. But what I will say is this: is that if we talk about things like date rape, and we talk about rape in general, I find it hard to believe that there's no correlation between the woman's behavior, whether that behavior be in terms of her dress or in terms of the places where she was and the times that she was there and the people that she was with, which is all part of her behavior and the choices that she made, and the likelihood or the unlikelihood of rape. So, for example, what's the likelihood, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but what's the likelihood that a woman's going to be raped in her own home?
Right, that's not likely, and I'm not saying
right. So,
behaviors, but I was doing the correlation directly to dress.
Well, dress is a part of her behavior. Dress is a part of her behavior.
It's part
and it's a part of her modesty.
It's part of her modesty, but it's also not like, I mean, if she's putting herself in a situation where she's amongst males who she's not related to, that's completely separate than how she may be dressed.
Okay.
And so that's why I'm coming from that correlation with it. I agree with you. There's certain situations you might put, alcohol use and different things that would be more vulnerable to being raped. But just the dress in and of itself, I guess is the point that I was making. It has never really been shown to consistently affect whether a rapist chose his victim or not.
Well, one way you can see it, and this is the point I was trying to make in the talk, is that, and you made the point about reported versus not reported, but I would be very confident that rape, if you were to compare the amount of rapes in our times to the amount of rapes 100 years ago, 120 years ago in this country, you would find a huge disparity.
And
yeah.
Because some of the studies show that the prevalence of rape is also tied to the punishment that is associated with it and whether it's accepted by society. So I agree with you. In this day and age, it's more considered accepted if it happens improperly 125 years ago.
And may Allah help us. May Allah help us. Like Fiche, anything else? Any questions, comments, complaints? Atfadli.
I have a question in regards to the feet being exposed.
Hey.
Can you touch on that, please?
Touch on it in what way?
I was taught that necessarily that socks are not the sunnah way to cover your feet. Being that can't be the way that they are covered. That wasn't the you know, it's not the sunnah way, like, okay, when your feet are covered with socks. And that if your feet are exposed, to lengthen the garment, and if your feet are still exposed after the garment is lengthened, then if they appear, then it's okay. So can you touch on that?
First of all, there's a few things. One is that when it comes to what a woman has to cover, the scholars basically have two opinions. They have basically two opinions if we look at the earliest of scholars. And those opinions are that a woman has to cover everything, including the face and hands, except for an eye or two eyes to see the way. And that was the opinion of Ibn Mas'ud and some of the Tabi'een and some scholars throughout history. The second opinion, which is the opinion of Jamhur, the majority of the scholars throughout history, is the opinion of Ibn Umar, Aisha, and Ibn Abbas. And that's that a woman has to cover everything with the exception of the face and hands. And when they say everything, that would include then what? That would include then the feet. There is an opinion which is shadh, an opinion which is odd, irregular, not regularly accepted, that a woman can reveal her feet, and that was the opinion held by some Hanafiya, some of the Ahnaf, some of the people from the Hanafi madhab. But again, if we look at the early scholars, Sahaba themselves, they had two opinions: either everything, or everything except the face and the hands. So, also this is supported by the hadith of Rasulullah. So, for example, the Prophet was asked about a woman's garment. We're going to come to this in more detail when we talk next week about what constitutes hijab. But there was a particular hadith where a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she talked about how her garment, which was so long, it would drag in what? In dirt, and sometimes there will be filth in the dirt, and so therefore filth would gather on her garment. So could she shorten it? So the Prophet said, yes, she could shorten it this much. She could shorten it this much. And the way he said it indicated that what? It still need to be what? Dragging, to cover what? The feet. And he said whatever catches hold of the garment in terms of filth will be cleaned by what? The dirt that follows it. But she should leave the garment long. We also have the Athar of Ali ibn Abi Talib, in which he was asked about the garment of a Muslim woman, what she should wear. He said, Dir'in sabighin. He said she should wear what? A long, flowing garment. Again, the scholars derive from this or extracted from this that the garment should be flowing long enough to cover what? To cover the feet. The person who asked Ali, he then went to Aisha to verify what Ali had said. And Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, and what he said is what? Is certainly true. So these are some of the evidences that the scholars have used to show that what? The feet have to be covered. Now, how they are ultimately covered is something which hasn't been necessarily what? It's not something that the Sharia has stressed or emphasized, but it has let us know that the feet should be covered. So whether a woman has a short garment, she covers it with a sock, or she has a long garment and she doesn't wear any socks or whatever, at the end of the day, her feet should be covered and concealed because they're part of what has to be covered and concealed. Now, suppose she wears a long garment, and as she walks, the garment kind of does what? It kind of raises up and exposes the feet briefly, and then the garment falls. She walks, it raises up, exposes, and it falls. Or when she's standing, it's covered. But if she kneels down to pick up something, the garment rises slightly, and maybe the front of her toes are shown, and then when she stands up again, erect, it'll be covered. In those cases, that falls into what Allah said, إِلَّا مَا ظَهْرَ مِنْهَا, except that what ordinarily appears thereof. It appears unintentionally. So if she wears a garment which normally covers, under normal circumstances, would cover her feet, and then something happens, walking, wind blows, whatever, beyond her control, and it reveals it, and in that case, then that falls under the category of إِلَّا مَا ظَهْرَ مِنْهَا, what ordinarily appears thereof, and therefore she wouldn't be blamed for that. Does that clarify it, or is there more clarification?
A garment that's long, but if you walk with your feet
shown,
then it's...
Yeah, so if it's long and it covers it ordinarily, but as she walks, it kind of like lifts up as she walks and reveals, and then it falls and conceals, reveals and conceals. But what she shouldn't do, she shouldn't walk out and wear a garment like what I have on. See that? Which is what a lot of women do, right? So she shouldn't do that unless she's going to wear socks or some type of garment to cover her feet. All right.
Isn't from the Sunnah
Not further.
to have it like, I think, I know is that.
Like a handspan?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what he told the woman, a handspan or two handspan, but no shorter than this, which indicates what? The garment should be long enough to cover the feet. Yeah. طيب. تفضل أنور. تفضل يا شيخ.
I think, what is the background of people that are wearing the niqab? Is that they consider that as part of hijab?
Eh, what's the background of it?
No, from the evidence you gave,
Eh,
it's not necessary, right?
he said it's not necessary.
Covering your
Covering the
entire
face.
except for eyes.
But as I said previously, the scholars, they differed from the earliest of times, talking about the companions. They differed themselves. Ibn Mas'ud and his pupils from the Tabi'een, they were of the opinion that the woman has to cover everything, which means what? She would wear that. Whereas Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar, and Aisha, they said, no, a woman can expose her face and what? And her hands. And they have their evidence to support that. So is it required, according to the Jumhur, and the strongest evidence, and we're going to see this, is that no, the woman's not required to cover what? Her face. But this is highly what? Highly recommended. It's highly recommended. It's a virtuous deed. And the Prophet's wives all covered what? Their faces. And the way you knew the Prophet's wives from his concubines was if they covered their faces. And many of the believing women during the time of the Prophet, they covered their faces. So it's a virtuous thing. It's highly recommended, but it's not required. It's not required. And it's definitely not a custom or a tradition or an Arab thing, which is what some people say. That's not the case. Not further.
I do have a question, but I wanted to make a comment on probably the statistics thing.
Uh-huh.
One big flaw with that is that, we'd have to go so far back
Mhm.
in our current society to a time where it was normal that one, none of us was there and we don't have any statistics on that. It
Mhm.
was reported. But if you go to a place like Morocco,
Mm-hmm.
Morocco right now is probably where we were in like the 50s,
Mhm.
the point where people were kind of experimenting with not wearing hijab, but it was kind of like, it's still that innocence there where people like, you might have boyfriend and girlfriend, but it's kind of like he comes over your house and you kind of like, back in the 50s you had sock hops and all that kind of stuff like
Uh-huh.
that. So if you go to a society like that, which is us 50 years ago or 60 years ago, you can then clearly see like how the society is like, they're starting to get more, rapes are starting to go up, and certain things are starting to go up. And whereas and they have the technology to actually report that stuff.
Mhm.
We kind of report some of that stuff more so because if that happens to a woman, it's detrimental to the family. So they kind of know some of these things. But you see that, like, just when you go over there now, there's more people wearing more tighter clothes and, things like that. So the numbers are starting to escalate accordingly with it and stuff like that. I think if you're going to do a study, you might want to study a society that comes from, it's at that spot right now, and then see where it goes, as opposed to us. Nobody here remembers where America was even close to that. And most of those people, they're old. So but the question is, and I was discussing this with a brother or whatever, like with the niqab. Okay, there's some people, it seems like, and you see this more, I guess, in the last, few years or whatever, you'll see women that she might have a plain face, a simple face. But you see the tendency of some people now is they wear the niqab because out of everything she might have very pretty eyes. So she wears the niqab as a way to hide what may dull the rest of her, but she knows her eyes are very, very beautiful. Kind of like in the beginning when you said that the point of hijab is to hide things. But some people wear hijab, and such a degree for some people it's beautiful.
To accentuate.
If you saw them regular, you'd be like, but then in hijab, you're like, oh wow, she might be. So the same. No, I mean, I don't want to say that when it's joking, but seriously, there's some people like, oh, it's time to get married or something like that, so I'm gonna make sure I wear this, and then I make sure my eyes, are made up, so that way all you can see is my pretty eyes, and it actually has the opposite effect. It causes people to be like, wow, she must be pretty because she's made up her eyes and she's just so I was having a discussion with someone, and I was wondering what do you think about that? How does that, now if somebody just wants to wear niqab and it just happens as a byproduct, but if you set up and say, well, I'm going to do this so it only accentuates this part of me, which is my prettiest part.
Well, again, we can't control a person's intention.
Right, of course.
And we just reminded the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. So actions are judged by intentions, and every person will have precisely what he intended. So we couldn't tell a woman, for example, hey, you're accentuating your eyes with that hijab, you have to take that niqab off. We couldn't really do that. But if she did it with that intention, that would be between her and her Lord. But again, we don't know anybody's intention. And we couldn't tell someone not to do something virtuous because we think they have the wrong intention. But if they have the wrong intention, they need to check that within themselves. Yeah. I do want to say about this issue of statistics that one of the problems, and Anwar, you made me think about this. One of the problems, I guess, with statistics is that they're always subjective. They're always subjective. Is that basically people tend to bring together statistics to support what? An opinion. Okay? So maybe it wasn't a good idea for me even to mention that in what? In the talk. But, because the problem is that data, when it's gathered, it can be used what?
However you want it.
To give to basically promote a certain view. And that's why you'll have studies. Two people do two studies. And they'll study the same thing, but because this person's goal is what? Is to prove this point, and this person's goal is to prove that point, they come up with what? Very different, different. But, so maybe, like I said, maybe it wasn't a good idea, but I do see, I'm going to be honest with you, I do see a correlation between the lewdness of society and what's accepted in terms of being moral or immoral nowadays versus before, and the type of violent crimes that we see occurring in the society. But the problem with statistics, you'll find studies that'll say that has nothing to do with it. And that's likely because the people who are doing the studies want to show it has nothing to do with that, because people like to blame the victims. And they want to basically push back on that. And then other people will come and show. You might have, for example, some religious organization which wants to show the opposite. And they'll produce a study that shows, women, when they dress like this, are more likely to be preyed on than women who don't like that. So maybe it wasn't a good idea even to mention that in the first place. But at the end of the day, if we just take statistics out of it and we look at it from a religious perspective, we know that that when a woman does this, she's more likely to what? To protect herself from any harm, whether the harm comes in the dunya or in the akhirah. طيب, Sheikh, like you want to say something?
One point, the point that Anwar made about studying like countries that are behind in comparison to the way the society are. I sort of agree, like the example he gave where Morocco, where like they're back in comparison to the US, because society like that, when things like that happen, most of the time, there's no reporting, because in that sort of society, people tend to keep things because for shame, and so people would not know. So when we talk about Islam, and Islam encompasses everything in life, and we geographically we cannot ignore it, especially where we live. So, and one of the cases, as the sister said, that Islam, the media and everything, how media displays things and the rate of going up. She doesn't. I don't know where she stands that, if she agrees or not, but I incline with you too. I agree, because I have seen several cases where people like me from third world country, and we come in here, and their behavior, because through what they have been exposed through media and the society, what it has to offer, their mindset and their social life that they carry on, it kind of I sort of see the correlation with the media and how it goes. So I don't know if the statistic, again, we have to take it out of the picture, because most of the statistics is based on bias. But I'm not sure if using third world countries, their society, to give us an example to see how it relates to rapes or anything like that.
One thing I'll comment on what you said is, you said that Because one of the problems with statistics too, I guess, would be, or people would say, is that women are, when something like this happens, there's a tendency for women not to what? Not to report it.
Depending on the society that you are.
But let me ask you this question. Does that really, is that dependent on the society? No. Even in a society like now? No. Where in general, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to come to the aid, they still won't what? Report it. So I don't think it could be said, because some people will say, oh, well, you know, you really can't look at those, you can't look at the past because women would have been far less likely to what? To report it. So that's probably why they have far less. No, I think regardless of circumstances, women are going to be less likely to what? To report. I think that's going to be consistent across the board and can't be factored into whether or not we say there is a discrepancy.
I have a question.
Tafadhal.
About tonight's class. You kind of emphasized several times about the shoulders. About the shoulders. So I'm wondering if are you saying the proper way, or is what he's saying the proper way to do it is how, like, you see some in Saudi how they have the head abayas?
That's one way.
You know, and so basically from the head to the shoulder is like
a
slope. There's no headpiece on the head, whatever, that's now resting on the shoulder.
Right.
So are you saying that, like, if you actually have your headpiece wrapped around your head and it's resting on your shoulder, like if it's, your head comes down, shoulders out, down, like this is incorrect?
Yeah.
It should be sloped like this here?
Yeah, ideally speaking, the garment that the woman wears, that's the thing about Islam. It didn't tell you that you have to wear garment X or garment Y, but it gave what? It gave like guidelines, okay? And so if a woman wears a headpiece, and that headpiece, for example, I don't know if you guys have ever seen, it's like a piece you put over, it's sewn up like this, but it comes out like this. And it'll come down to maybe about right here, maybe like to the what is this now? Yeah, the elbows, alhamdulillah. طيب, so she could wear like a jilbab, the jilbab that most women wear nowadays, which is what? It's not actually an abaya. It's not like the head abaya, but it's like that garment or that cloak that they put over, but it actually rests on the shoulders, not on the head. But then she would put a khimar like that actually does what? Will go on the head and then come what? Come outward. That's the way it really should be. That's the way it really should be. Yeah. So there's no what? Tashkhis. There's no what? Silhouetting of the body. That's ideally how it should be. Because at the end of the day, a woman's beauty is not just certain body parts, and it's not just those fancy garments that she wears in the home. But in many cases, it is what? It is, you know, her shape, the width of her shoulders, or the lack thereof. These things are attractive to a man. And so the more she conceals that, the better. Barakallahu feek. Huh? Fi shay. And we're going to come to that. We're going to mention that. Yeah. We're going to mention it.
الأسبوع الماضي في حديث ضعيف لا سلام على طعام واحد بياكل كذا والناس بيسلموا عليه ولا سلم عليه لا سلام على طعام.
Really?
في هذا؟
No, أول مرة.
حديث ضعيف.
طيب الله يجزاك خير. الله يجزاك خير أول مرة. Anything else?
Can you translate?
Say it. Translate it, Sheikh Muhammad. No, you translate. تفضل. لا أنت. No, you. No, you. Huh? Please, Muhammad, tell them what you said.
What I said that there's a weak hadith that is common among brothers, mostly I think Arab, that they use if they are eating and gathering and you came to them and then you say salam alaikum to them, they will say la salam al ta'am. There is no salam greetings while we eating.
Subhanallah.
And this is what is weak. It's not.
So if somebody tells you that, let them know that's not true. That's not correct. Anything else? Going once, going twice. Let me just say this in closing. I don't want any of the sisters to leave the program feeling that this program was an attempt to pick on them. It's not. It's just teaching the deen. And we're going to talk about men as well as we go through this whole process. So don't think, oh, you're talking about hijab, you're speaking on women, what about the men? No, we're going to talk about the men as well.
When?
So you won't be here, huh? So make the point of to be here. But it's a part of the deen. It's a part of the deen we need to learn. Just like we learned all these other adab, these other etiquettes. It's a part of the deen we need to learn. We need to learn. This is the best forum for us to learn and study it. The second thing, I don't want you to think, because we talked about sexual assaults, we talked about this, that, and the other, that again, we're picking on women. Or we're blaming the victim. No, that's not it. Again, we're just trying to point out how this hijab can be a cause for what? For safety and security for the woman. There's a correlation between her being preyed on and that. We tried to make that correlation. Just to what? To emphasize and stress the importance of this hijab and its benefit. That's it. But again, we're not picking on women or saying that women are somehow to blame if something like that happens. We don't believe that. I don't care what a woman is wearing. She should never be what? She should never be assaulted by a man. That's not an excuse. We don't believe that. We don't hold that. And we don't hold the woman responsible if she's assaulted. Sometimes a woman does do something that you're scratching your head and saying, what was she expecting? Like, for example, a documentary that I recently watched where a woman was jogging at 9 o'clock at night, pitch black dark in Central Park, and was raped. I'm just asking you, man. You're running by yourself in Central Park, and there's a lot of what? Foliage. People can hide. And people can jump out of that foliage and snatch you in there. And no one will know what happened to you. It's just not intelligent. Still, it wasn't right. We don't say, well, that's her fault. But at the same time, we do have to what? Take our precautions. And definitely this what? This hijab is a precaution. That's what we meant by that. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبي محمد.